This is Raymond Cobb, and in 1995 he would sit down with his father to have a conversation. The kind of conversation no father ever wants to have with his son or daughter. Raymond would go on to tearfully recount the time he broke into a neighbor's house to steal their possessions, and the truly nightmare-inducing event that would follow. Raymond Cobb was 17 years old in 1994. He was still in high school in Huntsville, Texas, and played in a band. He had friends with whom he hung out with from time to time, but not the kind of friends you have a lifetime bond with. People described him as immature, as many 17-year-olds are. He was not described by people as violent or aggressive, but had been in trouble with police over a couple of thefts in his teens. Living across the street from Raymond was the Owings family. Husband and father Lindsay Owings, mother Margaret Owings, and 16-month-old daughter Corey Ray Owings. They were a quiet family who kept to themselves and just wanted to live life. On a winter night in December, Raymond broke into the Owings residence with the intention of stealing their high-priced stereo, which he had seen a few days earlier after taking a look around the property from the outside. Raymond crept inside the property. It was dark and quiet, so he assumed that there was nobody home. He moved into the living room and began disconnecting the stereo system when he was surprised by Margaret. Panicking, Cobb stabbed Margaret until she was dead. He then picked up her body and dragged it into the woods behind her house. He dumped the body in a secluded spot and then returned to the house again. When back inside the house, he found 16-month-old Corey Ray asleep in her bed. For a moment, he stopped in the doorway, looking at the newborn child. Then, he scooped her up and carried her back out to the woods where her mother's dead body was lying on the ground. He dug a shallow hole just big enough for an adult. He picked up 16-month-old Corey Ray and dropped her in the hole. He then rolled the dead body of her mother into the hole and on top of Corey Ray, both crushing and suffocating her to death. He would later claim that Corey Ray fell into the hole. The morning after, Margaret's husband Lindsay would call the police and report her disappearance. After some investigation, police discovered that a short time before, a passerby had witnessed Raymond skulking around the property, and so police picked him up for questioning. He admitted that he had burglarized the house, but denied knowing anything about the disappearance of Margaret or Corey Ray. He was charged with the burglary, but with no bodies and no evidence linking Raymond to their disappearance, he was released on bail, which was paid by his father. It would be almost a full year later when Raymond would come home one night and sit down with his father and tell him about the time he broke into a house across the road. He would tell him how he stabbed poor Margaret. He then broke into tears of guilt as he described how he didn't know what to do with the crying child and made the worst possible choice and dropped the body in a shallow grave. His father listened patiently to the story, frozen in horror at what he was hearing. When Raymond had finished, his father told him to hand himself in and face the consequences. But Raymond said that he was too scared and would be leaving first thing in the morning. Raymond went to bed that night, unaware that his father had secretly called the police and told them of Raymond's confession, and planned to run away. The police then arrested him. The police would bring Raymond in for questioning, who immediately waived his Miranda rights to counsel and confessed to the police and told them where he buried the bodies. The police went to the spot in the woods and dug up the hole. Inside were two skeletons, one adult, one child, side by side. Cobb was then charged with the double murder of the mother and daughter. The judge sentenced Cobb to the death penalty, and he sat on death row waiting to be executed. In 2005, a Supreme Court decision would cause some anger regarding some capital cases when Roper v. Simmons would set the precedent that someone legally defined as a child at the time of a capital offense could not receive the death penalty for it. Cobb's sentence was then commuted to life in prison, as he was only 17 at the time of the incident. Raymond Cobb still sits in jail, paying for the terrible crime he committed. When searching for research materials for the case, I stumbled across a blog in which someone uploaded a letter from Raymond in which he genuinely seemed to feel real guilt at what he had done. Regardless of his contrition, he had given a 16-month-old child one of the cruelest deaths imaginable, suffocated by her own mother's dead body. So one could argue that the daily nightmares which terrify Raymond's sleep is the least harsh consequence he could have received.